Hi everybody, my name is Dennis and welcome back to another album review. Today we are reviewing the latest record from metal duo The Body, entitled I've Seen All I Need to See. Now going into this, I think The Body are a pretty consistently enjoyable group. Their music has been growing a bit stale over their past couple of records though. They've always had a style to them. They are very noisy, very dense, they have a drone metal influence to them, and they are very well known for their signature screamed vocals, which are very low in the mix, very shrill, very shrieky at points, and that's kind of always been their style. Over their past couple of records, they have tried to implement a couple new things into it here and there, like I thought the inclusion of some really unsettling female vocals. I thought that was a really nice touch on one of their more recent records. But overall, you could tell they were kind of driving themselves into almost an artistic hole. They weren't really developing their style any. They were kind of putting out the same kinds of material over and over again. There wasn't a lot going on, and it got to the point where when you listened to The Body, you more or less knew what you were going to get. They still had a good sound, and I still think their records were generally enjoyable up to this point. But going into this one, I really wasn't expecting a whole lot different, and if it was more the same, even if I did enjoy it overall, I more than likely wasn't going to review it just because there's nothing really new to say about it. However, this album is an amazingly pleasant surprise. This is a really, really great album, and I think it's their best album yet. It is just an experience. It is harrowing, it is spine chilling, it is so incredibly unique. It's really, really amazing, I think. And it's not because they're trying anything new, but more because they're refining their core sound. They're stripping things back to basics, getting rid of all the extra fluff, the extra show, and just putting out a raw, unfiltered, noisy drone album. It is easily one of the most spine-chilling things I've heard in a while, probably the most terrifying record since Clipping's last album, and it is just amazing. You're going to know pretty much immediately whether this sound will be for you or not. Give it 2 tracks. If you're 2 tracks in and you think it's awful, I completely understand. It is layered with so much distortion. It's very noisy. It's very dense. It's very staticky almost. It has a white noise effect to it at points. Yet all of this is done with such a meticulous intention to it that it ends up being ironically gorgeous. Where we have these moments that are produced in an interesting way. I haven't read about it in depth, but doing a little bit of research, the way it was recorded, they would take these low quality recording systems. They would record whatever they wanted to record, then they'd play it back and record it again, and do this as many times as they needed to until they reached that sound they were looking for that is just so grainy, it's so noisy, it's so ugly sounding, and then utilizing that in the mix of everything else to produce something really amazing. It all starts with the track Lament as the opener, which is probably one of my favorite songs on the entire record. It's a gorgeous opener that starts off with this really unsettling vocal sample. We get more of this later on towards the end of the record, but it's a great intro to the whole thing, and it really sets up the tone. The tribal sounding drums are loud, distorted, and noisy, and really sell the show. And towards the latter couple minutes of this song, we get this really, really unsettlingly gorgeous melody put into it. I'm not entirely certain exactly how they were able to construct this soundscape, but it is just really, really gorgeous. It has a kind of an unsettling nature to it while still being really engaging and having a great rhythm to it. It's a gorgeous song rhythmically, and those famous low mixed shrill shrieks really do add to the unsettling atmosphere of this entire thing. It's a very, very beautiful song. The following track, Tied Up and Locked In, is another great one. It doesn't really do anything that I don't think any other tracks do specifically. This one doesn't have a lot of qualities about it that other tracks don't also have, like we'll get into later, but it's still a great song nonetheless. The drumming on here is phenomenal. I love the pacing of the song. It's one of the shorter tracks, but it doesn't detract from how hard that it hits. The vocal performance again just adds so much to the atmosphere, and it's an amazingly just harrowing song that I think transitions Lament into the next track very, very well. Speaking of which, I believe it's pronounced eschatological imperative, is a really amazing cut. Probably one of my favorite drumming performances on this entire thing. The fast paced, very quick drumming, especially towards the end of the track, are very, very engaging. It's a really almost uncomfortable sound the way it's all mixed together. It's one of the grainier tracks on here. It's very, very cluttered, it's very noisy, and it just works so well. I just can't get over how uncomfortable this atmosphere is. But it's not uncomfortable in the sense of, oh, I don't want to listen to it, but it's more like uncomfortable in the sense of it has the sense of dread, the sense of unease, where you just get more and more captivated into this horrifying sound. It's another really, really beautiful one. And there is some vocal switch ups across these tracks as well, especially towards the start here, where the vocals are either mixed a little bit louder at points or they take on a bit of a deeper tone, and it works really, really well. The following track is probably the only one that I didn't thoroughly enjoy. It's A Pain of Knowing. It's not a bad song, I just wish there was more to it. It's very drony, it's very noisy, but there's not really any sort of rhythm. While most of the other tracks on here have controlled amounts of distortion, whether it be, you have a large cymbal crash, so then you have this explosion of distortion surrounding it, or you have these these heavily distorted guitar riffs that, play ever so often throughout the song that complement the noisiness of it all. This one is just kind of straight noise. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just I wish there was more to the mix here. It was almost a bit of a loss of potential, because even though I do like the atmosphere and it does keep up that tone that I enjoy so much about this record, I just wish there was more to it, because as we'll get into later songs, there's some really beautiful progressions, some really creative collaborations of sounds, and some really unique instrumental choices. So for this one to just kind of have about 5 minutes or so of straight distortion with some of the loudest mixed vocals all across the entire record, it wasn't bad, but to me it was just okay. The following song, The City is Shelled, is another top tier song from this record. I love the progression of this. This song progresses so beautifully. You have this really catchy kind of distortion that runs for about, I believe it's about 4 or 5 notes. And it repeats over and over again in this really, really great way. And then you get these tinny sounding drums that slowly bring their way into the mix, where it starts just, a few measures of just the distortion. Then you get a few measures of that same distortion, but now with the tinny drums. And then eventually those tinny drums turn into these loud distorted booms, where you get these just crashes that come into the song. And you have these almost alien sounding off-key squeaking that runs throughout the tail end of this track. And again, it just complements to the unsettling atmosphere so well. I love the way the song progresses. It constantly keeps you engaged. There's never a dull moment of this song here, and it's easily one of the best across the entire record. The following track, They Are Coming, is another great one. I love the drumming of this one specifically. Although there are other tracks I've mentioned before just have these explosive bits of distortion following the drums, none of them quite hit like this one. Where each smack, it's not just distortion, but it feels like just this grand rupture, like the ground is opening up beneath you. where, it's almost like if you close your eyes, you have a nice set of headphones or a nice stereo system around you, and you just let this play out. It evokes images of almost like, solid metal being hit directly and just exploding into shards everywhere. That is how heavy and how explosive this drumming really is. And it just works. It just really, really works. I love the tones of this song. I love how explosive it is. I love how in your face it is. It works so, so well. The Handle the Blade is a pretty solid cut as well. I really like the fast-paced drumming on here. It's much more quick. It's much more punchy. It's less of a drony sound like the others, but more of a one of those faster kind of drumming styles that you would expect from most metal. And I love it. I think it's great. It's a nice change up for the record. It keeps it from being a bit too monotonous, because that is one thing about this record. These soundscapes that are used are generally pretty common throughout. Even though you'll have these nuanced differences from track to track, they generally have the same, kind of style and sound to them, which I guess it would have been nice to see a bit more diversity as far as just sonic progression throughout this album, but I think there's enough of it here considering what they're doing that it doesn't really bother me a whole lot. But I love the way the Handle the Blade works. Again, that fast-paced drumming is very nice. I think the way the track kind of builds up slowly and then kind of trails off towards the end, it works really well. It's a really great song, and it builds up to the Path of Failure, the closer, in a really great way. Path of Failure is an amazing closer. It's basically a Pain of Knowing, if a Pain of Knowing was great. It's, again, a very slow-burning, very drony, very almost relatively mellow track on here, yet it has this wild, unpredictably paced drumming that sounds very avant-garde in nature that runs through the whole thing. Sometimes it is mixed softly to give the distortion more room to just explode your eardrums. Sometimes it is the primary focus so that you really just hear this fast-paced, unpredictable, just going ham on the drums. And it all works gorgeously. Again, I just love the atmosphere building of everything on here. From the sampled vocals to the tension building, occasionally on some of these songs you'll have, just one note, and one note, and one note, and you're just waiting for that build up to come into something, and you'll get one note, one note, one note, and then eventually it just explodes. And the way that tension is built throughout these songs is just phenomenal. It really kept me on the edge of my seat. It doesn't really grow predictable, I don't think. It's still a great build-up, even on repeated listens. And I just love this album so, so much. There's not really that many weak points on here. Only one of the songs that I didn't think was great. And it's just a lot to love. Again, if you don't like this style, you're going to know within the first track or two, and there's not really a point of going on with the whole thing if you don't like the way it sounds at first. But if you're willing to get into some really harsh, drony noise that is just layered in gorgeous amounts of distortion, this thing is definitely worth your time. I'm feeling a light 9 on this one. I absolutely loved it. And I hope that you guys love it as well. I'm not sure how many of you will, but I thought it was great. So if you listen to it, be sure to tell me what you thought of it down in the comments below. Tell me how wrong my opinion is, as always, and I'll see you in the next review.